Essay is consisting of some coherent paragraphs. Any paragraph is consisting of some connected sentences. Any sentence is made of one or more clauses. So, in order to write a well-prepared essay, you should know how to write a correct clause. Now, let me explain for you the two types of English clauses. A clause is a group of words that contains at least a subject and a verb. So, in order to describe a group of words as a clause, this group of words should contain subject and verb at least. Here are examples of correct clauses and of incorrect or wrong clauses, which cannot be described as clauses under any conditions. First, let us see two types of clauses. The first type is called independent clause, because in this type there is only subject and verb. And the another type is called a dependent clause, because in this type there is subordinator, which is followed by subject, which is followed by verb. Okay? In the first type of clauses, which is independent clause, we can see subject and verb. Subject here is ecology, and verb is the present form of verb to be, which is. Okay, so this sentence is ecology is a science. This sentence is what? Independent clause, which can stand alone, which doesn't any support, which has no subordinator, which is consisting only from subject verb. Okay, subject and verb. Okay, it can also contain a complement such as a science, but this just an additional part, which is not necessary. Okay, but here in this second type of clauses, which is dependent clause, there is subordinator, because, and the subject pollution, and the verb causes. Of course, cancer here is a complement or an object. So this sentence, because pollution causes cancer, this sentence is what? Is dependent clause. Why it's dependent clause? Because it depends on other or on another clause in order to has a complete thought. So it cannot stand alone, and it needs another clause to complete this thought. So when you see a clause beginning with subordinate, you should describe this clause as what? As dependent clause. But if the clause has no subordinator, just subject and verb, so this clause is what? Is independent clause. So here there are two kinds of clauses, independent and dependent, as I told you. Independent clauses as I told you, independent clause contains a subject and a verb and expresses a complete thought. It can stand alone, so it is independent. It doesn't need any clause to complete its meaning or its thought. Okay, here two examples of independent clauses. The first, the sun rose. If we add the sun, of course, subject, and rose is a verb. If we add here subordinator, so this independent clause will be converted into dependent clause, as in this example, when the sun rose. So here the sun rose is what? Independent clause. And in this example, when we if we add, or after adding a subordinator in the beginning of this clause, so this subordinator converts the independent clause into what? Into a dependent clause. So here, when the sun rose is a dependent clause, but the sun rose is an independent clause. Okay, a dependent clause, okay, begins with what? As I told you, a subordinator, such as when, while, if, that, who. A dependent clause doesn't express a complete thought, because this subordinator makes the clause becomes incomplete. Okay, and it needs another clause to complete a thought. Okay, and to fulfill its meaning. So, but if we omit this subordinate, the clause will be independent, as in the first example, the sun rose. In the second example, water evaporates rapidly in warm climate zones. This example, or this clause, of course, it's independent. Water is subject, evaporates is the verb, and rapidly in warm climate zones, these words are just complements of an independent clause, and this complement can be in the beginning, or can be both in the beginning of the clause. So you can say rapidly in warm climate zones, comma, water evaporates. Okay, so don't be misled by complement, because there is difference between complement and subordinator. Subordinator is not separated from the other words of the clause. by comma. But complement, if complement begins the clause, it is separated from the clause by what? By comma. Okay, if it comes in the beginning of the clause, the complement, if comes in the beginning of the clause, this letter should be capital R, then comma, then water evaporates. Okay, but if the complement becomes in the end of the clause, so we don't need any comma. But here subordinator, because water evaporates rapidly in warm climates, because here is a subordinator and it is not separated by comma, or it is not followed by comma. The same thing we do with the subordinator when. Okay, so we don't put here any comma because subordinator is different from complement. Subordinators which convert independent clause to a dependent clause can be after, although, before, etc. So this is the group of subordinators. Here an exercise to make you differentiate between independent clause and dependent clause. Here, if you decide that any clause is independent, you should just write this abbreviation in depth. And if you decide that any clause of these is dependent, so you just need to write this abbreviation dip. Okay, let's start with the first one. Globalizations means more travel for businessmen and women. Globalization is the subject, means is verb, and here in the beginning of this sentence there is no subordinator, so this clause or this sentence is what? Independent. In the second example, as business executives fly around the globe to sell their company's products and services. Here this clause begins with what? With as. As is subordinator. As just as, or as if, or as soon as. So as is what? Is subordinator. As can be found in the beginning of what? Of dependent clause. Of dependent clause. As a dependent clause starts with subordinator, which is followed by subject and verb, then complement if it is found. So here this clause starts with subordinator, so this clause is which is followed by subject. Subject here is business executives and the verb is fly. So this clause is dependent because it begins with what? With subordinator as. Third one, jet lag affects most long distance travelers. Jet lag is what? Is subject. Affects verb. So this clause contains subject and verb, so it is what? Yes, independent. Which is simply the art to sleep at the inappropriate times. Which is what? Which is subordinator. So this sentence is what? Dependent. Okay. So this sentence is what? Is dependent. During long journeys through several time zones, comma. Oh, comma. So this is what? Subordinator? No, it is a complement. Okay, which can be in the end of the sentence, but here the author writes in the beginning of the sentence in order to mislead you. Okay, so the real start of this clause is the body's inner clock is disturbed. Body's inner clock. Here the subject is a clock, or body's inner clock. This is the subject. Is the verb. Disturbed is a complement of the verb because this sentence is what? Is passive. So there is no, here there is no what? There is no subordinator. So this sentence is what? Is independent. This clause is independent. The same thing here. For some reasons, comma. So for some reason is what? Is a complement, not a subordinator. So here travel from west to east causes greater jet lag than travel from east to west. Here travel is what? Is subject. Travel from west to east is subject. The word travel is subject. Causes is what? Is a verb of the subject travel. So here there is no subordinator, but there is a complement, and complement can be found in independent clauses as well as dependent clauses. So because there is no subordinator, so this clause is what? Is independent. Okay.